This sort of led to what I would call the quote of the week from Kalshi. We're disappointed to see Washington State continue wasting taxpayer dollars.
So the citizens of the state can go waste their dollars on Kalshi.
Welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop.
And I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook.
We are coming to you from Seattle, where it's a little hot and muggy this week.
I love it. I just love this heat.
Feels like the Midwest.
Yeah.
Well, it's also where we get to report each day on what's happening around us in business, technology, and innovation. What happens here matters everywhere, and every week on this show, we get to talk about some of the most interesting and important stories and trends in the news. John, coming up this week, Seattle venture funding drops 40% while AI money floods pretty much everywhere else across the country, especially the Bay Area. A judge rules against your favorite online platform, Kalshi.
Big fan.
Joke will become apparent later in Seattle, and rules that the prediction market may not be able to continue operating here. One company's 26-year-long only in Seattle story from startup to public company, and nearly 40 Seattleites are giving up their smartphones for 5 weeks in exchange for flip phones. Could you do this at this point?
No.
I think that's a big ask. Very big ask.
Maybe one day.
So, John, I wanted to jump in with a topic that we've discussed in the past, but this time it was particularly stark in terms of the venture capital numbers in Seattle. And I realize that these financings are not necessarily the be-all, end-all of what's going on in the market. Certainly fundings are just one signal of the strength of a startup market. That said, it really stood out to me. This was the PitchBook NVCA, National Venture Capital Association numbers for Q2. We talked about Q1 in the past, but now we have Q2, so we have the full H1 for 2026. And Seattle area startups raised $2.7 billion in the first half of 2026 across 163 deals. That's pretty significant. I mean, that seems on its face like a large number, but it's down 40% from $4.5 billion across 210 deals across the same period a year ago. So the first half of 2025, I really have started to enjoy digging through these numbers, by the way. John, you used to cover venture capital quite a bit just as an industry, and you still pay very close attention to it. Like, what should I be looking at in these numbers? What stands out to you? Because when you look at it in terms of those trends, it doesn't sound very good.
The chart that you did with this story really paints a pretty negative picture.
This is the chart that ranks Seattle and other major metros by their funding over the first half of the year.
Right. I was really blown away by Philadelphia.
Philadelphia is ahead of Seattle across the same time frame, $5.1 billion across 440 deals.
That just doesn't seem right.
Austin was the same. Austin was also ahead of Philadelphia, $6.5 billion across 222 deals. Now, the interesting thing about this chart, John, is that you have to exclude Silicon Valley from this kind of chart because it's so much larger than everybody else that it makes all the other little bars on the chart basically imperceptible in terms of their differences. Silicon Valley raised $319 billion over the same time period. So, more than 100 times.
More than 100 times.
As much as Seattle. So,
yeah, incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, but I am surprised by the ones that are ahead of Seattle. New York, I guess so. LA, Boston, Austin, but Philadelphia. What's going on with Philadelphia?
Well, and also what's interesting about, I would even say Austin, Boston, especially Philadelphia, I don't necessarily think of those places as major AI hubs. So I don't know what's going on. I think this is worth exploring in more detail. One thing I will say, we've talked about on the podcast in the past, that it's really hard to determine what a Seattle-based company is, what a Silicon Valley-based company is, what a New York-based company is, especially in the startup realm. It's changing so much. So what you've seen are these massive rounds by companies like Databricks and Anthropic, just hundreds of billions of dollars that really skew the venture capital numbers. If you look at this, you could say that Seattle actually is getting a share of those dollars, because those companies are setting up major engineering centers here to take advantage of the talent that's here. Now, they're not technically headquartered here, but some of their all-star executives and engineers are based here. So Seattle is very much a hub of cloud, AI, and I think it will continue to be. I mean, you look at our list on GeekWire of all the engineering centers that are set up. I mean, we just wrote about another one this week. There's another story coming next week on another one. There's a lot of investment from companies in this region. Now, the challenge is that the founders of those companies aren't necessarily starting their companies here, and that would create even additional wealth generation here if they were here. And that's not happening with the frequency that I think the business and tech and venture capital and startup community would like to see.
Now, I want to point out, so what I do with this, by the way, is I have a folder on my desktop with basically all of our startup data from our startup database, the GeekWire 200, and I've started putting the PitchBook and NVCA numbers in there. And I asked it just now, I asked Claude. So I use Claude Cowork and I connected to that folder. And so I just asked Claude, why Philadelphia? And it said, short version, one freak quarter. The Philadelphia market normally runs about 1.3 billion per quarter, but in Q1 2026, which played into the first half of 2026 numbers, it spiked to $3.7 billion, driven by a handful of concentrated deals, the biggest being World Liberty Financial, which is legally headquartered in Wilmington, to your point, but has a large
but
Philadelphia
they still had
presence.
440 deals, right?
Yes, that's true.
They still had a lot of deals.
Yes.
That's what was surprising. It's not just the dollars. It was their deal total, which was so high. So I think one thing that this region asks itself a lot when we think about the Seattle region is whether we are a supplier of AI talent and whether we're a supplier of AI entrepreneurs and startup capital. And I think you can certainly make the argument that we're a supplier of AI talent in a big, big way. I mean, there are studies out that show Seattle's really second to the Bay Area in AI talent. The problem is capital and entrepreneurs.
So where does that leave the region? I mean, we're talking about Seattle Tech Week coming up next week, this barrage of events sort of celebrating and catalyzing the local community. And I'm sure this will be a big topic of conversation. Where does Seattle stand in the national and international landscape of tech hubs? If you're in a position where you've got the talent, but not necessarily the decision makers who are landing the biggest amounts of money, where does that leave you as a tech community?
Well, I would say things can change very quickly and can change with just one deal. Imagine if Databricks, we'll take them for an example, just happened to start here. I mean, I think there's a good chance that the next Databricks or Anthropic could start in Seattle. And there's enough talent here that it should just by happenstance occur.
And that alone could skew the numbers, could create the next Amazon that
potentially
takes off in the market.
It really only takes one or two of these to skew those numbers in a big, big way.
And I should point out that the engineering center you mentioned, you covered this, John, is a London-based data center startup called Nscale. It's planning a big expansion in Bellevue, which is a whole other story. We've seen this boom of AI companies, in particular on the east side in Seattle. And that's an interesting trend in and of itself.
Although to counter that, Anthropic, when they expanded in the Seattle area, they actually expanded in Seattle, so not on the Bellevue side of the Lake Washington.
Well, John, to your point, Blue Origin is reportedly seeking up to $10 billion in funding. Jeff Bezos trying to finally bring in some outside investors and not just bootstrap that thing himself.
But is that a Florida company or a Seattle company
exactly.
At this point? I don't know. I mean, that's why some of this is not that important, at the end of the day. I think where it does matter, and this gets into the political discussion, is if your founders and entrepreneurs are here that have created enormous wealth, what do they do with that wealth in their backyard? And we've seen the likes of Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, Rich Barton, the co-founder of Expedia and Zillow, leave. And when they leave Washington State, they take those dollars with them. I just don't think they're going to be as inclined to invest money in their backyard. And so cultivating a landscape where people that have had enormous entrepreneurial success, and as a result, the wealth that comes with that, want to be a player in their hometown community, I think matters. And we're losing those people for a variety of reasons. You could say it's in part, I mean, a lot of people are saying it's because of the tax infrastructure, but it's more than that. It's in some cases it's weather, in some cases it's just a change of scenery, And so it's going to be interesting to see if the success that we've had with the entrepreneurial talent here, with those people that have generated a lot of wealth, if we can retain those people, one, and then two, it's growing the next generation. So there are two things going on simultaneously.
Do you think that the next company that could be that next Databricks or Anthropic, if it is coming from the Seattle region, do you think it's on the GeekWire 200 right now? Or
I hope so. If we're doing our jobs, it is.
Or does it even exist now, is I guess what I'm saying.
Oh, it could be. It could be. I mean, there are some companies on there, but like you look at our GeekWire 200 list, and it kind of it shows this point that we're making. There are companies on there like Temporal, which they're based here. The co-founder Samar is based here, co-founder and CEO, but like his team is pretty distributed. Company like ChainGuard, one of the co-founders is here. The CEO is on the East Coast. That company is highly distributed, and so it's like, I don't know. This is a thing we always struggle with in terms of, does it even matter anymore? I think it does matter at the end of the day to have a company and business and industrial base that's rooted to a certain place where your schools are, your fire departments are, all the services that come around it. And so I think it still matters, but companies are very easy to move these days.
And if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, the GeekWire 200 is our index of the Seattle region's top privately held startups. We update it every quarter. You can check it out. I'll link to it in the show notes. Just to round this out, John, here are the top 5 for the second quarter, as reported by PitchBook for the Seattle region. Helion Energy, they raised $465 million in a Series G round. That's number 1 on the GeekWire 200, by the way. Star Cloud, space-based data centers, $170 million. Expo, we've talked about them in the past, autonomous cybersecurity systems, $155 million. Starfish
barely
Space,
based here.
Barely, yeah. This is
they have
this
a
is the
post
company.
office box here. What?
Yeah,
I don't know if they have any employees here.
Right, and we debated this on a past episode as to whether they even belong on the GeekWire 200. So, Starfish Space, $110 million for spacecraft servicing, and Gradial Enterprise Agentic Software, they raised $65 million. So those are the top 5. It gives you a sense for the kinds of companies. You got a little bit of AI in there, but not a lot. And so in that way, it's almost like a counterplay. It's the alternative bet that you could make on this market. Say you're thinking that there is going to be an AI bust. Maybe these big picture infrastructure companies, as risky as they are, might be something a little bit safer as a bet for the region's
Fusion
portfolio.
as a safer bet. I don't know. Or space.
Yeah.
Space. Data centers in space is a safer bet. I mean, some of these are highly, highly risky ventures that, in all likelihood, aren't going to have any success.
My thought is that you are not yet seeing that next big company, the next Anthropic or Databricks coming out of the Seattle region yet on the GeekWire 200, because I don't think it exists yet. I think it's going to be created in the next 6 months. Specifically, John, here's my prediction. Put this on Kalshi. My prediction is that company will emerge in September 2026. That's when that company will come.
So, well, if we just had Kalshi based here, everything would be solved, right?
Let's talk about that coming up next. All right, welcome back. It's Todd Bishop and John Cook. Kalshi, the prediction market. This is a fascinating story for lots of people. We've got a good friend who is really into this stuff. Does Mike actually wager on some of these platforms?
I don't
Do you know? But he's very into this topic. Our friend Mike. We probably shouldn't say his last name.
He's a contributing editor at GeekWire. Why can't you say his name?
Mike Lewis. Mike Lewis, owner of the Streamline Tavern and occasional contributor to radio stations, and every once in a while in the past, the GeekWire contributing editor. At any rate, Mike was very early on in these prediction markets and actually encouraged us very much to cover this stuff back in the day. And it's funny because we're now covering it mostly because of the regulatory and legal fallout. And there's a huge question over whether these prediction markets should be regulated at the state level, where in general, attorneys general and legislatures have been cracking down on them, or at the national, federal level, where the current administration especially is very open to this kind of stuff, and they are allowing it. And that is the crux of the question in this lawsuit brought by Washington State Attorney General Nick Brown against Kalshi. And just this past week, King County Superior Court Judge John McHale issued a preliminary injunction against Kalshi, saying that their argument that they should be regulated at the national level actually does not hold any water. This sort of led to what I would call the quote of the week from Kalshi. This was from a spokesperson. States don't have jurisdiction to regulate prediction markets. Many courts, including the Third Circuit, have made this clear. We're disappointed to see Washington State continue wasting taxpayer dollars.
So the citizens of the state can go waste their dollars on Kalshi. That would be a better use of funds.
Let's hear your rant. Let's hear
I don't
your
want to
prediction
rant
market
too much.
rant.
I just don't see any redeeming business value for these types of companies. I really don't. I mean, I'm not a big fan of, as you know, Las Vegas or gambling. I don't think it. What does it do?
It redistributes wealth on a large scale.
Is that good?
No.
I know. That's my point.
Not based on merit, but based on luck or bad luck. And in the end, in the interest of the people who are operating the platforms.
Right. Or the people that are rigging it to make some money.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the business. I think it's highly addictive. I think it is gambling. I think it should be regulated and regulated heavily. And I don't see redeeming business value here.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, you're a maker of automobiles, or you're an oil, like an oil producer, which has its negative aspects and has its critics. I can actually, see the argument for what it does for the economy and how it powers industry and makes our lives better in some way. You can make that argument. I think there are alternatives that also can do that as well.
Sure.
But, okay, that has a value in the business ecosystem. This is just gambling and entertainment, gambling, and it's a quick way to lose money. And my big rant on this is everybody's so up in arms about AI and data centers, and just people are so fired up about it. Meanwhile, Kalshi's just cruising along, and I'm going to place a bet on the next hurricane in the Gulf of, I guess it's not the Gulf of Mexico, the
Gulf of America.
Gulf of America.
Yes.
And, I just think it's stupid.
So among the evidence that was presented by Nick Brown, the Washington State AG, in the case was a Kalshi ad showing a text exchange, like a fictional text exchange in this ad, in which one user says they found a way to bet on the NFL despite living in Washington State. So this is the direct pitch that they're making.
I don't see the argument. Maybe I'm too dense to understand it. How this is not just gambling. I mean, you can actually see it truly as gambling. I mean, you can make a prediction on whether the Seahawks are going to beat the San Francisco 49ers.
And if your prediction is correct,
you get more money. Right?
So is that
gambling? What is this? I mean, what is this crazy argument that it's like something else? It's
remuneration for great perception and prediction capabilities. Yes. So
there was also the story in the news this week about the teleprompter operator in the Trump administration.
Yes.
And I guess they were doing Kalshi bets.
If you go any further on this thread, you're going to get us some very negative reviews in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I can tell you.
Okay, I'm just saying this was a story that was out this week that somebody was paying for placing Kalshi bets related to the words that were going to be said during certain speeches.
And it was the teleprompter operator.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So the order requires Kalshi to preserve all records tied to Washington users. It does not shut down Kalshi as a prediction market in Washington State, at least not yet. Both sides have until August 3rd to submit proposed language, and then there will be a full order to follow by August 5th. So if you're big into these markets, apart from sending an email telling John how he's full of crap, you can sort of look to August 5th as your date in Washington State as to whether or not you're going to be able to continue to use it in the future.
And if you do talk to younger people who think that this is the way the economy works, this is how you make money. I mean, there's a belief system of people in their 20s and younger who thinks this is how you're going to work and do your job in the future, is placing bets on Kalshi. There's not like a work ethic towards becoming a doctor or an engineer or something. It's like, I want to just place bets on Kalshi as my job.
Well, what are venture capitalists doing ultimately?
A form of that.
Yeah.
They're doing a form of that. But you could make the argument. They're doing work and due diligence, and you can make... They can, and you can make the argument, hopefully, part of their investment criteria is betting on something that actually is going to add value to business, economy, communication, transportation, whatever, space travel, whatever.
Right.
And I would argue that actually has some redeeming value. This is just moving money around.
Jobs. You're potentially creating jobs.
And creating jobs. Yeah, absolutely. This is literally just moving money around.
Perfect segue, because our next topic ties together the two themes that we've talked about so far. Some of the differences between Seattle and Silicon Valley, and long-term bets by venture capitalists. I got a chance this past week, John, to dive into a company that I've sort of followed tangentially over the years, but not really directly. And I got to say, I am hooked on covering this company just in terms of the long-term stakes. First off, I want to set this up by asking, what were you doing, John, in early 2000? And I think this might be good for everybody else out there, just to plant that date in your mind in terms of your own life, because it's very relevant to the story we're about to discuss.
I was working as a reporter covering startups and venture capital at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer newspaper. And one of the stories I probably covered was a company called Impinj.
Impinj. I actually don't know if you covered Impinj.
I think I did.
Yes.
At points, certainly throughout their history. Now, in the founding period, I'm not certain, but certainly over the 26-year history or whatever of the company, I have covered aspects of Impinj. And it's an interesting technology and an interesting company.
So Impinj makes what are known as RAIN RFID tags. That's a specific category of radio frequency identification. But the whole idea is, especially for inventory, for logistics, for all sorts of different applications where you want to know the specific location of individual items, these battery-free tiny chips have huge value. And Impinj is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, player in this space. They're based in Seattle. The technology came out of Caltech. And this is a quintessential Seattle tech story. It's behind the scenes. It's a long play. Two venture capital firms in Seattle, Madrona and Arch, invested in Impinj very early on. And this was the definition of patience in terms of a venture capital investment. Impinj was founded in 2000. They did not go public for 16 years. That is how long it took Impinj to go public. The story we wrote this week, talking with the CEO, Chris Diorio, and others, was about the 10th anniversary of them finally making their IPO. My favorite anecdote about the IPO, John, was Tom Alberg, the late venture capitalist with Madrona. He was one of the original champions of Impinj. And whereas most venture capitalists, especially after 16 years of seeing this investment go through, when it finally reached IPO, they would have sold every single last share they possibly could. And you know what Tom Alberg did? He invested $500,000 of his own money into Impinj at the IPO. And it was actually this message to the market, because all the other investors saw what was going on. And I think it actually helped them get out of the gate a little stronger. What do you take away from the Impinj story?
Oh, I think you're right on the mark there in terms of it being a Seattle story. And what I mean by that is You're right. Behind the scenes technology, the infrastructure, the plumbing that makes all this stuff work is very much a Seattle story. And I think that's the Impinj story. But just the endurance. And you look across the landscape of companies that have had a lot of success here. Tableau is another company that comes to mind. Isilon is another company, a Madrona-backed company that also has an interesting story related to Madrona that was an investor in Isilon. They went public. They ended up tanking. The stock fell to, I think below $1 at one point. Madrona started investing money back into Isilon in the public markets because they believed in it and they bet on it. And Isilon went on to have great success. And so what I like about the Seattle tech stories is that I think it's how business operates. There's ups and downs, there's peaks and valleys. And if you ride the wave of, you just ride it out, some of these companies are very successful. So as I mentioned, Tableau is a great example. Isilon, again, these are companies that are kind of behind the scenes a little bit. Another one is Concur, and a lot of the people at these companies, these older kind of longer term companies, actually have stuck with the company for a long time too. And so what you don't, I guess why this contrasts with the San Francisco Bay Area is that it's a little bit more hop to the next hot thing quickly in the Bay Area. And you see more meteoric rises, like an Instagram style exit, or what we're seeing with some of the companies we were mentioning before in terms of Anthropic or OpenAI. And those are sexy and fun and typically a little more consumer oriented. But these companies that kind of grind it out with grit, that's really the entrepreneurial story. And that's why I like the Impinj story and why it resonates in Seattle.
What you're saying reminds me of the attention span issue. Basically, Silicon Valley is kind of the dopamine hit and Seattle is the long read. It's funny too, you mentioned Isilon. So I talked with Tim Porter at Madrona, who worked with Tom Alberg and was very involved and still to this day is very connected to Impinj. And Tim told me that because of Isilon and the success of Isilon, Madrona was able to have more patience. He said that in the early 2000s, it was looking rough for that fund, but Isilon's success transformed that outlook and made it really a really great fund. And that cushion allowed Madrona and Tom Alberg to be patient with Impinj, basically sticking with it for the long term because they'd made so much money back on the Isilon investment.
And we were talking about this earlier too. This is what can happen. Things can change pretty rapidly. And that next great success could be at our doorstep before we know it. And the Impinj story is really interesting. I think what struck me from your reporting, Todd, was that this company still, 26 years later, hasn't made a lot of money.
No.
They're running a massive deficit still. And I think, what did you say? They've had one profitable quarter in all of that time?
No. Since they've gone public, they had some very marginally profitable years right before they went public. And I think that probably helped them in the IPO. Since they've gone public, they've had one annual year of profits. And the primary reason for that was this settlement that they had over patents with this rival. And that's actually one of the interesting subplots in this whole story, is this much larger rival that they have, NXP, that they've had these huge battles with over the years in the courts, in the market, and now are getting a pretty sizable licensing stream from them because they won that court case. But anyway, to your point, it's actually right now getting to be a super interesting story 26 years later. Not that it wasn't all along, but it's possible within the coming quarters we might start to see them actually become profitable, which is a great story in and of itself.
It seems like they're poised to really break out, but the stock still hasn't done that great. They're still not hitting those profitable marks. Chris Diorio, the CEO, told you we have a gigantic blue ocean. It's the size of the Pacific, he's very optimistic. And Chris is a great CEO. I know you got to interview him. I've spent time with him and interviewed him in the past. And he's a very humble and modest leader, and he's all about the team. And it's another kind of Seattle characteristic. And I agree, but I was like, okay, why isn't this company taken off in a bigger way? It seems very intriguing as we're tracking everything. And we're tracking all these products from, they work in pharmaceuticals, and food and grocery and agriculture is becoming a bigger segment for them. Boy, it seems like they should be able to turn this into a much more profitable one, a much bigger business, but fits and starts in the company's history for sure.
Yeah, and we should say, do not take investment advice from John or me on this stuff. It is a public company, and it's not often that we talk about public companies at this stage where they've got this much more potential. It's more the giants that we typically talk about. But to your point, John, Chris Diorio, I interviewed him once for this story, and at the end of the interview, we'd had such a good conversation and interview. Some of the best interviews are the ones that just turn into conversations because they'll say something that sparks something back. And anyway, and at the end, I was like, oh, there were a few other things I wanted to ask you. And he said, no problem. Let's schedule another one. I mean, the CEO of a public company, that doesn't happen that often. And he's a pretty remarkable guy. The one other thing I want to point out, it was so revealing to look at how that investment came together. Ed Lazowska, the longtime, now I think mostly retired University of Washington computer science professor, was the one who made the introductions. Chris Diorio has long been affiliated with the University of Washington computer science department, where he went after he was at Caltech. And once Chris and Carver Mead, the kind of Caltech legend who Chris originally studied under, came up with this idea to use these tiny chips that they had figured out for something, Ed made the connection. And Patrick Ennis, who was at Arch at the time and is now at Madrona, he shared those emails with me that he originally got from Ed. And it's just fascinating to see how that one simple connection 26 years ago really created the foundation for this company in the region. And it's just kind of cool, like one small little act by somebody who really cared and really had no skin in the game himself other than wanting to do the right thing for the community, for the university, and for the people involved. It was pretty cool to see. All right, coming up next, trivia and life without smartphones.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
This is GeekWire's Trivia Challenge.
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
Welcome back. We will get to trivia in just a moment, but first, let's set it up, John, by talking about this story that you wrote about these people who are giving up their smartphones willingly for 30 days, for a month. This is called Month Offline. It's a national movement. There's a Seattle chapter that's pursuing it. And they had a cohort of 40 people.
That's right. Yeah. And these people are going to forego their smartphone for most of August, or all of August and a little bit more, and switch to a flip phone. Do you want to do that?
No.
I don't either. I'm not going to do it.
It really speaks.
They really want us to do it, by the way. They keep pitching us to participate and I think write about the experience on GeekWire, but I'm just not willing to do it. I'm sorry. I'm too tied to my smartphone. I love it too much, Todd. I love it too much.
So I think you tried this for, was it a weekend?
I think it was a weekend. You found the story. I had forgotten I did this. I detoxed from tech for a full day. And it wasn't just smartphone at that time.
It was everything.
Everything. I think I was off online. I was off the internet. I wasn't posting anything. Yeah.
That would appeal to me more, actually. It'd be more realistic.
I think so. Yeah, because then you can, I don't know, get out in nature and do something. Although, how would you go birding without the Merlin app? Right? Can't do that on your flip phone.
With your ears, John.
No, with your ears.
And your eyes.
And your binoculars. Okay.
No binoculars.
Too techie?
Too techie. Just
all
nothing
okay.
but anything organic. Only organic. Okay, so nearly 40 people have signed up for the inaugural Month Offline Seattle cohort.
They actually capped the cohort at 42. 40. Yes, they are not accepting anybody else, so we should say that.
So the group gathers weekly for what the organizers call part happy hour, part support group. The challenge runs July 28th through September 1st, so most of the month of August, 35 days. Organizers expected 10 to 20 participants, but now this cohort is the largest outside of Washington, D.C. and Brooklyn. And yeah, that's what
good luck.
Good luck to them.
we won't be hearing from you. Maybe we will on their flip phone.
All right. So related to this, John, I had to...
This is the trivia question?
Tie it all together.
Okay.
Tying everything together, Tom Alberg was a investor, or actually early general counsel, I believe, at McCaw Cellular.
Correct.
Tom Alberg, who we were just talking about in that prior segment, the late investor from Madrona, who was early on in Impinj. So that company, of course, was started by Craig McCaw. He inherited a small cable company in Centralia, Washington, about 2,000 subscribers. The one piece of his father's business that survived all the debts. 20 years later, he was running it as the largest cellular company in America. It's relevant in part because, this is one of the reasons that the cellular industry took off. It's one of the reasons we had those flip phones.
It's one of the reasons why T-Mobile is still based in the Seattle area.
That's right. So related to that, the question this week, John, for GeekWire Trivia is, in 1994, so about 6 years before you were covering the early...
It's the year I graduated from college.
That's right. Right. 2 years before. Really?
Yeah.
I didn't graduate until 1996.
Oh.
Anyway.
Yeah, you're a young buck.
No, and it took me a little longer at Chico State. As they say, Chico State, 6 or 7 of the best years of your life.
Love it.
All right, here's the question. In 1994, AT&T bought McCaw Cellular. What did they pay?
Ooh.
A, $3.5 billion. B, $6.5 billion. C, $11.5 billion. D, $19 billion. Or E, it was free with a 2-year contract.
Oh, jeez. I'm going to go with, I think it's C, $11.5 billion.
You are right.
That number just stuck in my head.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And you probably didn't even cover that.
No, but
you
there
probably
was
referenced it.
Referenced it a lot.
It's like it just started flowing out.
Yeah,
It was the largest deal after the 11.
That's right. That's right. That's because it was one of the largest acquisitions in the state of Washington's history for a long time.
That's right. At the time, it was the second biggest merger in American history, behind only RJR Nabisco, which is the one they wrote about in Barbarians at the Gate. Did you read that book? I loved that book. Oh my God, it was an amazing book. McCaw had more than 5,000 employees when the deal closed. AT&T had 300,000, to give you a sense of the scale. Fortune ran a piece that year pointing out that the average McCaw employee was 33, and the average AT&T employee was more than 43. So very different cultures bringing these two companies together.
Good one.
Yeah, that's
I like
the
that.
trivia.
Definitely a throwback there.
All right, thanks for playing, everybody, and thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Todd Bishop.
And I'm John Cook.
We'll be back next week with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast.